This is Denmark. For decades, it's been viewed as one of the best places to live in the entire world. Ranking high across many quality of life indicators like healthcare, education, and infrastructure, it's no wonder that it has often been an attractive place for migration from across the globe. In fact, over the last 3 decades, this has gradually been rising as Denmark has welcomed more and more migrants. But in the last few years, public opinion on this subject has completely changed, and Danes are taking a stronger stand against migration than ever before.
Tensions are increasing in Denmark as hordes of refugees continue pouring into the country.
It has some of the most restrictive immigration policies in the EU.
We're not interested in getting a whole lot of people who we're supposed to integrate.
Migrants are arriving uninvited and refusing to adopt Danish customs.
Since 2019, Denmark has shifted its approach from integrating refugees into society to now emphasising their return as soon as the situation in their home country allows it. In fact, the term integration has been replaced with self-support and return in official language. In April 2021, Denmark began revoking permits of some Syrian refugees, claiming it was now safe to return to Damascus. This of course sparked controversy, with some claiming it to be inhumane, but Denmark was unfazed by the criticism. And those affected have been told to stay in return centres until deportations resume or they decide to return voluntarily. Typically, policies against migration have tended to be occupied by parties further towards the right of the political spectrum, like the AfD in Germany or National Rally in France. But in Denmark, these policies have become commonplace, regardless of whether the government has been left or right-leaning. Of all the Nordic countries, Denmark has the lowest net approval ratings for migration from non-EU states, and a sentiment which is growing. To many outsiders, this may seem strange. Denmark, like its Nordic neighbours, is often seen as some sort of liberal utopia, with a strong welfare state and a generally very tolerable view on migration. In fact, neighbouring Sweden, which lies just a 10-minute drive away, has taken in by far the highest number of migrants of any Nordic country. But recently, this has turned sour, as failures to integrate have seen a spike in migrant-related gang violence across the country and its major cities. Denmark's approach to this issue stands in stark contrast with what many believed of the wealthy Nordic regions being a welcome home for migrants, with its leaders saying that its generous policies of the past had betrayed the working classes, who have had to bear the brunt of immigration and integration failures, and endangered the welfare state. But where has all of this come from? Immigration in Denmark has been gradually increasing for years now, so why is it only now reaching a boiling point? Denmark is also facing another issue. It simply doesn't have enough shows and films on its Netflix library. In fact, it's got less than quite a few of its European neighbours, and unless you're viewing from Slovakia, then you could be getting more films. To fix this, you'll need the sponsor of today's video, Surfshark VPN. Out of all the subscriptions that I have, Netflix, Spotify, Amazon, the one that I use most is Surfshark, and it's by far the cheapest. While most subscriptions cost upward of $15, Surfshark is just $2.49 a month. And when you split that between 7 friends and family members, it's just 36 cents each. So for less than $1 each month, I get access to better prices on products and flights that use browser cookies to make things more expensive. I get to travel the world virtually, and I get to access sites that are blocked by my region, like Netflix from another country. And perhaps most importantly, I protect my anonymity from online companies recording my data. So to start taking your internet browsing seriously, you can visit the link in the description, and if you use the code InvisibleHand, then you'll get to browse safely for just $2.49 a month, and you'll also get 4 extra months completely for free. Surfshark also has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can rest easy in your purchase. Click the link in the description to find out more. Denmark is one of the richest countries in the world, with an average salary of around $53,000. And the sudden feelings of negativity toward migration are to do with a fundamental aspect of Danish life, and one which is held very dearly to its citizens: the Danish welfare state. Denmark has had one of the oldest welfare states in the world, which began to take shape in the late 1800s, With the introduction of old age pensions and health insurance, when the world began to industrialise, Denmark, although late to the boom, began to quickly grow too. Incomes grew, and its neutrality and geography during both world wars meant it didn't face as great a hardship as some other European countries, and could rebuild its economy quickly after the wars. In the 50s and 60s, the welfare state was expanded again to include comprehensive social security systems, including universal healthcare, extensive public housing, education reforms, and more robust unemployment benefits. Today, Danes can receive up to 1 whole year of parental leave, and they offer some of the most generous unemployment benefits anywhere in the world. Despite economic challenges in the 1970s and 80s, Denmark maintained its commitment to welfare programs. Healthcare and education are mostly free, and amongst the best in the world. The state is very generous, but this needs to be financed through taxes, and Denmark has maintained high tax rates for many years. The average Dane pays about 46% in income taxes, with broad support for this system because it provides a high quality of life and a robust social safety net. But Denmark's existing model of the welfare state has been put under challenge in more recent years due to an increase in migration. Currently, Denmark's welfare system functions effectively because everyone contributes to it. While some individuals benefit more from the system than they contribute, this is balanced by others who pay in more than they take out. And this is after all the point of a welfare model, and this balance maintains its equilibrium. However, this equilibrium begins to shift when the number of people drawing from the welfare state increases without a corresponding rise in contributions. Immigration to Denmark has been higher than emigration over the past decade, contributing to the population growth of the country. And as of 2014, more than 8% of Denmark's population consisted of immigrants, with a large part originating from non-Western countries. However, here lies the problem. Incomes earned by non-Western migrants tend to be significantly lower than Danes. Annual income before tax for male residents from Syria, Eritrea, Somalia and Bulgaria was on average €33,000. For Danes, it was almost twice as much, at €60,600. This also translates into wealth, as savings among 60 to 69-year-olds with a non-Western background were 8 times less than native Danes. This makes sense for first-generation migrants, who will take time to learn the language and develop the skills necessary to earn a higher wage in the economy. But when this effect persists across generations, clearly migrants which have come to Denmark have not been integrating well. And this presents a problem. This paper from the Danish government analyses the net financial contribution of those living in Denmark, calculated by subtracting their total costs from their total contributions to the state finances. And it found that native Danish people contributed a net total of 41 billion Danish krones, while those from a non-Western background and their descendants had a net negative contribution of negative 24 billion krones. Children and the elderly usually take out more than they put in, regardless of origin. And to balance this, people of working age need to contribute significantly more. But even when adjusting for factors like age, the result is still clear. In general, net contributions are positive for Western countries and negative for MENAPT countries. Because of this poor integration, child poverty is common among non-Western families in Denmark, where 36% of children aged between 10 and 14 were found to live in relative poverty, that is under 50% of the median income. Compare this to only 2% among Danish children of that age. Put simply, poverty increases crime, and quite often violent crime. This study, based on data from US counties, found that the 10% of people living in the poorest counties had almost a 6 times higher homicide rate than the 10% living in the least poor counties. And a rise in crime linked to poverty has been a fear for many in Denmark, and they don't have to look far to see why. As we mentioned, gang involvement and violent crime has been an issue in Denmark's neighbour, Sweden. Less than 10 years ago, Sweden had one of the lowest gun crime rates in Europe, and today it ranks second highest. In Stockholm, gun violence is approximately 30 times greater than in London, and it's facing a major violent crime issue, predominantly controlled by individuals with a migration background. This is already happening in Denmark, as violent crime is committed disproportionately by those from non-Western backgrounds. Stats like this can often be misleading, as many migrants are young men who, regardless of origin, are going to commit more crime anyway. But even after adjusting for age and gender, we can see that crime rates are disproportionately higher from those from men-apt backgrounds. Denmark has looked to address this issue with a policy which has sparked a lot of controversy. Denmark's ghetto plan is a controversial policy aimed at eliminating so-called ghettos in the country by 2030. This is a plan to reduce crime and unemployment and increase integration in neighbourhoods with high concentrations of immigrants, particularly those from non-Western countries. One of the central measures of Denmark's ghetto package is the mandatory childcare and education requirement for children over the age of 1 from non-Western backgrounds. These children must spend at least 25 hours a week in daycare, where they are taught the Danish language and national values, where non-compliance with this requirement results in a reduction of social welfare payments for families. Another significant aspect involved the demolition and privatisation of public housing in designated ghetto areas. These neighbourhoods, identified by having over 50% non-Western residents, are targeted for redevelopment to rediversify the demographic map. Public housing units in these areas are either demolished or sold to private investors, with the intent of attracting wealthier, predominantly Western residents. By 2030, the government aims for these neighbourhoods to have no more than 30% non-Western residents, believing that a more balanced ethnic composition will reduce crime and improve integration, labelling the measures as essential. But perhaps unsurprisingly, these policies have also faced criticism. Residents across Copenhagen have protested the law, calling it straight-up racism that discriminates based on ethnicity and origin, with banners declaring "our apartments are not for sale." And experts argue that the law stigmatizes immigrants and contributes to further segregation, rather than promoting integration as intended. But this hasn't done much to stop the policy. And while the government has abandoned the controversial term ghetto, the overall policy approach has largely continued under the new terminology of parallel societies. Denmark is also taking measures to enable fewer migrants entering the country each year, by leading a group of 15 EU member states in calling for the EU to do more to prevent migrants from arriving to their EU borders in the first place, which includes incentivising non-EU countries along migration routes to accept large numbers of refugees. Last year, Denmark announced it was temporarily abandoning plans to outsource asylum procedures to Rwanda, but it had not given up on the idea of partnering with third countries outside Europe to handle migrants, such as Albania and Turkey. And if you're from the UK, then this system may seem familiar, as it's very similar to Britain's own Rwanda law, which was signed into law in April 2024, before being dismantled by new Prime Minister Keir Starmer directly after coming into office. It's clear to see that Denmark is taking a number of measures, which are not only stricter, but more radical than many other European countries. Denmark is still facing labour shortages, but these are in high-skilled vacancies, which tend to be ones which cannot be quickly filled from asylum seekers. The famed systems of Denmark and Sweden have made these nations appear to be attractive destinations, wherein many newcomers and prospective citizens have hopefully anticipated strong governmental assistance with their relocation and integration efforts. Thus, the attractiveness of the Nordic region to both Eastern Europeans and non-Europeans relied heavily on the area's reputation as a welfare society. However, as time has gone on, the difference in the approach between migration in these two countries has become clear, especially as Denmark has witnessed some of the downsides of poor integration in Sweden. Its policies are certainly controversial, but with these opinions on the rise across Europe as seen in the latest elections, will other countries start adopting similar measures soon?